Welcome back. Today's story starts with a blue envelope on a lace table, and one dead matriarch still controlling every breath in the room. At Bell House, grief looked polished from a distance. Up close, it smelled like lilies, wet coats, and fear. Nora Bell stood near the catering table, one hand around a paper napkin, the other around a truth she did not understand yet. She had come to help. She had come to keep peace. Then she saw the envelope. Thick paper. Lenore Bell's wax stamp. Her own name written on the front in sharp black ink. Nora did not pick it up at first. Her throat tightened. Across the room, Julian Bell was laughing too softly with the estate lawyer. Rosa, the housekeeper, stood by the doorway with her hands folded, face pale, eyes fixed on Nora like she had been waiting for this exact moment. Nora slid one finger under the seal. The wax cracked with a dry, ugly snap. Nobody seemed to hear it. That made it worse. Inside was a second will. Not a copy. Not a draft. A fresh, notarized page with one line that froze her blood. Sole heir. Rosa Mendez. Nora looked up slowly. Faces changed around her in a wave. Shock. Then hunger. Then panic. The Bell family had not lost an inheritance. They had been ambushed by one. And Lenore, even dead, had chosen the moment with perfect cruelty. 3 days earlier, Nora had warned Julian that Lenore was hiding something. He had smiled the way rich men smiled when they wanted a woman to feel small. He called her tired. He called her emotional. He called her unstable in front of a probate clerk and made it sound like concern. That was the Bell family trick. They did not shout first. They smiled first. They made you doubt your own pulse. Nora had married into wealth, but wealth had never married her back. She was the outsider with the wrong job, wrong clothes, wrong nerves. She painted murals for schools. She kept to the edges of family photos. She listened more than she spoke. To Bell people, that made her easy to ignore. Lenore Bell had been the opposite of easy. At 81, she still ruled Bell House through glances, envelopes, and total silence. She had a silver cane she never needed, a habit of entering rooms without apology, and a gift for making adult children feel 12 years old. Nora had watched her bully servants, charm donors, and punish anyone who asked too many questions. But Rosa was different. Rosa had worked in the house for 19 years. She knew which door stuck in winter. She knew where Lenore kept aspirin. She knew where the spare key lived when the family pretended not to know. Nora had seen her bring tea, meds, and wool blankets with no drama at all. No one thanked her. No one noticed. Then Lenore died. And within an hour, Julian took over the room like a man who had already won. He straightened the guest list. He corrected the priest. He tried to direct the florist. He even told Rosa where to stand. Rosa only looked at Nora once, then down at her apron, then away. That look had felt like warning. Now Nora understood why. The envelope in Nora's hand was thicker than paper. It carried weight. It carried intent. And somewhere inside Bell House, between the prayer cards and the deviled eggs, Lenore Bell had hidden the blade. Nora did not confront the room right away. She watched. That was her blind spot and her strength. She had spent years believing she could keep peace if she stayed quiet enough, careful enough. Today, silence had teeth. So she moved through the reception with the second will hidden inside a condolence card, close to her ribs. The estate lawyer, Mr. Halden, stood near the coffee urn with Julian and Lenore's younger daughter, Vivian. Halden looked tired already. Vivian looked offended by gravity itself. Julian looked prepared. Too prepared. He kept touching his cufflinks, then his pocket, then the lawyer's sleeve as if checking what had been lost. Nora waited until Halden was alone. She slid the envelope into his hand and watched his expression drain. He did not read it fully at first. He only saw the date. He only saw the notary seal. Then he looked toward the hall, and Nora saw him make the mistake of fear. "Where did you get this?" "From my mother-in-law's house. In the flower wreath. It had my name on it." Halden went still. That was answer enough. He said Lenore had told him there was a codicil, but not where it would be found. He said Julian knew about it too. Nora stared at him. Of course Julian knew. Julian had been circling the estate for weeks, trying to get Lenore to sign over power of attorney after the second fall. He had called it protection. Lenore had called it ambition. Nora heard her own pulse in her ears as Halden read. The room seemed to narrow. Rosa stood at the far end of the hall, her hands trembling now. That tiny movement mattered. It told Nora Rosa was not acting. She was bracing. Then Julian appeared at Nora's shoulder. Close enough to smell expensive cologne and bourbon. He smiled without warmth. "Whatever that is, give it to me." Nora looked at him. Then past him. Past Vivian's narrowed eyes. Past the guests who had begun to sense weather under the ceiling. She had been dismissed too long to enjoy this. But the room had already shifted. And once a rich family feels the floor move, every old lie starts cracking. Not this time. Halden asked for the family to gather. That was enough to turn a room full of polite mourners into witnesses. Nora felt the shift before anyone spoke. The dead are powerful, but documents are louder. Julian stepped forward first, because men like him always do. He kept his face smooth and his voice velvet soft for the guests. He said there had been confusion. He said grief made people imagine patterns where none existed. He said Lenore had trusted him to handle the estate. Handle. Like her life was an umbrella. Vivian stood beside him, arms folded, eyes sharp. She was not cruel for sport. That made her worse in some ways. She believed status was moral. She believed people stayed in their place for a reason. Nora watched Halden open the envelope. The first page was ordinary. Then he reached the codicil. Then he stopped. The silence hit the room like a dropped tray. This is a valid second will. Signed, witnessed, notarized. Dated 6 weeks before death. It supersedes prior distribution language. A room gasp followed. A chair slid. A fork clattered. Julian laughed once, forced and thin. "No. Read that again." Halden did not blink. "I do not need to." Nora watched faces turn. The guests had come for hymns and casseroles. Instead, they got a bloodless auction of the bell name. And then came the line that made the room physically recoil. "I leave my residence, accounts, and all residuary estate to Rosa Mendez, in recognition of loyal service, consistent care, and deliberate protection from family exploitation." Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another voice said, "Housekeeper?" The word hit the room like an insult and a revelation at once. Rosa's hand flew to her mouth. She looked as stunned as anyone. That mattered. This was not her plot. This was Lenore's. Julian's face changed. Not anger first. Fear. If Rosa inherited everything. Every month he had spent skimming, every promise he had made, every pressure he had placed on Lenore, all of it could come back in daylight. She manipulated my mother. That woman was paid to watch the house. Nora turned on him before anyone else could. Her voice came out steady, clear, and louder than she expected. "And you were paid to be family. How did that work out?" That was the humiliation peak. Not tears. Not shouting. A room full of people realizing the Bell family had been performing nobility overwrought. Nora saw it in the faces near the buffet line. Sympathy curdled into appetite. People love a scandal when they are far enough from the blast. Julian stepped toward Rosa, but Halden raised a hand. The old order had slipped. The dead woman had changed the seating chart forever. Julian wanted the study locked. That alone told Nora enough. She followed Halden inside while Rosa stood in the doorway, one shoulder pressed to the frame as if the house were too large to hold her upright. The room still smelled like Lenore's scent. Cedar. Powder. A trace of mint. On the desk sat a legal folder tied with black ribbon, and beside it, a small digital recorder. Halden did not touch either right away. He looked at Nora first. Then at Rosa. Then at Julian, who had followed with his jaw set and his tie loosened in anger. There is one more thing. He pressed play. Lenore's voice came through the speaker, dry but precise, the kind of voice that could cut velvet. If Julian is hearing this, he has already decided to perform innocence. If Nora is hearing this, then she found what I left for her. Good. She was always better at seeing what people try to hide. Nora's skin went cold. Lenore had known. She had chosen Nora as the carrier, not the victim. The recording continued. I am not leaving Rosa the estate because I am sentimental. I am leaving it because she stayed when this family only took. She saw my falls. She saw my bills. She saw who came into my room with papers and a false smile. She told me when accounts were moved. She told me when power of attorney was demanded twice in 1 month. She told me who threatened to put me in assisted living before I was ready. Julian barked, "Turn it off." Halden did not. I wanted one final lesson. Families like mine do not change under quiet conditions. They change when shame has an audience. So I set the table for one. A second will. A public reading. A trap. If my children loved me, they would grieve. If they loved money, they would show me in front of everyone. Nora felt the room inside her shift. Every strange instruction from Lenore snapped into place. The request that Nora deliver flowers herself. The odd insistence that Rosa keep the black ribbon folder. The way Lenore had asked Nora, weeks ago, whether she trusted people who smiled during mourning. This was never chaos. This was choreography. Rosa, if you are listening, you did your part. You kept me safe and you kept records. I know. Nora, you may think you were dismissed because you are soft. That is wrong. You were dismissed because you would not join their lies. Nora's breath caught. Julian, if you try to fight this, I left the evidence where your pride would never look. Halden set a separate page on the desk. Bank ledgers. Transfer records. Power of attorney drafts that had never been executed. One page had Julian's initials beside a blank signature line. Another showed attempts to move money from Lenore's accounts into a private trust. The dates matched the same week he had called her confused. That was the proof chain. Not belief. Not family memory. Paper. Voice. Dates. Motive. Bell House had been rotting from the center, and Lenore had preserved the smell until the whole room could notice. Nora stepped out first, and for the first time all afternoon, she did not look like an observer. She looked like a woman carrying the room's last clean fact. Her hands were steady now. That cost her something. Fear was gone, but so was the comfort of staying unseen. Julian followed, red at the neck, voice breaking at the edges. He tried one more smile for the crowd. It failed. This is extortion. Rosa confused my mother. Nora planted this. She has been obsessed with this house since the day she married into it. He pointed at Nora, but the gesture only made him smaller. That was his mistake. He needed her to be unstable. If she looked calm, his whole story fell apart. You called me unstable because I noticed missing checks. You called me dramatic because I asked why Rosa was signing deliveries for your office. You called me emotional because Lenore stopped inviting you into her bedroom. A sharp intake passed through the guests in the hall. Vivian turned toward Julian, and for the first time her face showed doubt. Not morality. Arithmetic. She was beginning to count losses. Mr. Bell, I have documented attempts to redirect estate funds. I also have a voicemail from Ms. Bell naming you and describing coercion. If you continue, I will freeze access and notify probate court before sundown." The lawyer's voice changed everything. Not emotion. Authority. The Bell family had spent generations winning with tone, but tone could not beat paperwork. Rosa finally stepped forward. She was small beside the Bell children, but the hallway seemed to make room for her anyway. She held the black ribbon folder against her chest with both hands. "I told Mrs. Bell because I was scared. He kept asking for keys. He kept asking where she stored her statements. He said she was forgetting things. She was not forgetting. She was watching. That was the reversal. Not just the will. The meaning of everything before it." Rosa had not been a servant in Lenore's eyes. She had been witness, guardian, and proof. Nora saw it clearly now. Lenore had made the most insulted woman in the house into the only one allowed to inherit it. Julian lunged for the folder. Nora moved faster than anyone expected. She stepped into his path, slammed her palm against his chest, and forced him back into the wall. The sound rang through the corridor. The guests gasped. Julian stared at her like he had never seen her before. Neither had she, not fully. "Touch her again, and I hand every paper to the press before court opens." There it was. Proactive. Dangerous. Final. Nora had stopped begging for fairness. She was now deciding who got to keep dignity. By the time the announcement spread through the house, the Bell dynasty had lost its polish. Guests who had arrived with sympathy casseroles now watched a family inheritance become a public accounting. Some left early. Some stayed because scandal is a kind of dessert for the cruel. Halden spoke in measured sentences. Accounts were frozen. Temporary control of the house and contents moved to probate protection. Any challenge to the second will would trigger immediate review of financial records and prior gifts. Julian went pale. Vivian looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time and hating the shape of him. Rosa did not celebrate. That made the payoff stronger. She only stood straighter than she had all evening. She kept one hand on the black folder and one on the table where Lenore's ring of keys had been laid down. Then Halden did the one thing nobody expected. He placed the old brass house key in front of Rosa and said, "Under the terms of the will, Bell House now recognized her as primary heir pending transfer." The sound was tiny. The effect was enormous. Julian shut his eyes for 1 second, like a man receiving a verdict from a god he mocked. Vivian made a strangled sound. One cousin started crying for the wrong reasons. Nora felt no triumph in that moment, only a hard and steady grief for how cleanly money had eaten their faces. "She told me you would be the one who stayed standing." Nora swallowed. That was the last gift Lenore had given her. Not money. Not a house. A sentence. A refusal to be mistaken. Then let's make it count. She walked to the buffet table and picked up the stack of condolence cards Julian had ordered with the Bell crest embossed on top. She turned them over. On the back, she began writing contact names for the probate attorney and a forensic accountant. She did it in front of everyone. Not because it was dramatic, but because the room had earned witness duty. Outside, thunder finally moved on. Inside, the Bell family paid in full, Julian lost access, Vivian lost her illusion of loyalty, and the house itself slipped out of their hands. Rosa inherited the walls they had treated like wallpaper. Nora kept something else. Her name, spoken with respect at last. An hour later, the hall looked smaller. Meaner, too. That is what truth does in a rich family. It strips away scale. It leaves only what was taken, what was hidden, and who had the nerve to survive. Julian was gone with a lawyer and a face he could no longer control. Vivian left in a car without speaking to him. The cousins scattered. One aunt promised to call a priest and then forgot which side she was on. Rosa stayed long enough to place Lenore's black ribbon folder inside the old brass box from the study. That motion was careful. almost tender. Nora stood by the guest book and watched the last of the candles bend low. Her hand still trembled a little, now that the danger had passed. She had not won cleanly. She had exposed people she once needed. She had turned a funeral into a courtroom. Some would say that was cruel. Others would say Lenore started it from beyond the grave. Both might be true. Rosa approached with the blue envelope, flattened now, seal broken forever. She held it out. Inside was one final note, written in Lenore's sharp script. Nora read it once. Then again. Do not let them turn your softness into consent. She closed her eyes. Lenore had seen her too clearly. That was the sting. Not money. Not revenge. Recognition from a woman who weaponized everything and still understood how hard it was to be dismissed. Nora folded the note and slipped it into her coat. When she looked up, the guest book was still open. Half the signatures were wet with condensation from glasses. One empty line waited at the bottom. Nora picked up the pen and wrote her name beside Rosa's, not Bell family, not guest, not outsider. Then she set the pen down and listened to the house settle around her like a verdict. So there you have it. One funeral. 1 second will. One dead matriarch who engineered a public collapse and made sure the greedy paid in daylight. If you ever wonder why some families fear the quiet woman in the corner, this is why. She may be the one who notices everything. And if you want more stories where inheritance turns savage, stay close. The next one may be worse.